The story you're about to hear is 100% real. This happened to me in autumn of 2013 while exploring a semi-abandoned ghost town just outside of Las Vegas. Throughout my years of paranormal investigations, I've come across several encounters that will always remain engraved deep inside my mind. One such encounter happened on the night of October of 2013 when I first visited a cemetery just 53 miles northeast of Las Vegas, Nevada, in the small town of Goodsprings. Goodsprings is known as being one of the oldest and one of the most haunted locations in the state. The town had its beginnings in the early 1900s when it became an important mining camp which included a hotel, a saloon that still stands to this day, a general store, and a small school that is also still there. I first learned about Goodsprings while doing some research on local abandoned ghost towns that I could go explore. The drive didn't seem so bad from where I lived, so I decided to go and take a look for myself. The quiet desert landscape was a welcome change from all the hustle and bustle that Las Vegas has to offer, so I was happy to get away from the city traffic. As I took my final exit from the freeway onto a smaller county road, I noticed that everything around me seemed oddly quiet. The desert landscape has a way of making things look dead, but there is also a strange type of beauty that comes with it. I turned my radio off so I can enjoy the sound of my truck's tires running on the pavement road. As I arrived into town, I noticed that there was a small cemetery sitting on the outskirts of town right next to the main road. I slowed down to take a look, but I didn't pull over. I wanted to leave that for later. As you enter into town, I saw that the buildings were just as they were described by the person who told me about it. The place had a small bar, some abandoned mining cabins, a small school, and what seemed to be some old, worn, and beaten down storage units that seemed to be made of adobe with tin roofs. I drove around the small area, and once I had my fill, I decided to walk into the local bar before making my way back out of town. The bar seemed to have a lot of history attached to it, and it very closely resembled the type of saloons you will see in the old western movies. The inside still held much of its original history, look, and decor. The place was empty at the time, so I decided to sit down at the bar and order myself a beer. Being that I was the only customer there and the bartender seemed friendly enough, I decided to strike up a conversation with him. He told me about the town's history and about a gunfight that happened over a game of cards many years ago, where one person lost his fight in the shootout. He even showed me where one of the bullet holes went right through the wall. He told me about how the movie star Carol Lombard lost her life back in 1942 after her plane crashed into the nearby Potosi Mountain, and that there are still plane parts scattered all through the desert that people are still finding. After speaking with him for a while, I felt comfortable enough to ask him if he knew about any local ghost stories or local ghost story legends that he could share with me. He went on to tell me a few stories about a local mine that was rumored to be haunted by what old-time miners believed to be Tommyknockers, and about an overnight mine guard who was shot dead after a robbery went bad. He also mentioned that their local cemetery was plagued with many ghosts and that people would often walk into the saloon to complain about children that would run in front of the cars on the road that lead into Goodsprings, even causing some drivers to lose control and crash into the desert. The bartender and I continued talking for a few more hours before some loud bikers showed up for a few drinks. I thanked them for the drink and the information, said my goodbyes, and headed straight towards the cemetery. As I arrived at the cemetery, I will admit that I felt a bit nervous being that I was alone and had just heard some incredible stories that the bartender had told me. I hesitated a little while, but believing that a lot of the legends may only be tall tales, I turned on my small flashlight and went on to explore it. The desert has a way of making everything seem spookier at night. The tall Joshua trees scattered all over its landscape resemble disfigured bodies standing there looking straight at you. The many old weathered tombstones made out of wood are enough to make you feel like you're walking into a horror movie. And the old half-cave plots will send your mind wondering if a body could actually crawl out of its grave. At this time, I wasn't planning on doing any type of paranormal investigation. I just wanted to take a look at all the plots. I read some of the names on the graves and I noticed all the different generations of families that are buried there. I also noticed that in the middle section of the cemetery there were about 10 small unmarked graves. While I was looking into it, I thought I heard a shuffle of feet on the far right side of the fence that surrounded the place. I ignored the sounds thinking that some small animal may be scampering the nearby area, but as I continued to walk around the cemetery, I heard what sounded like little feet running around it again. This time I headed in the direction of the sound and realized that there was a small plot sitting there completely alone. I also noticed that it had a very old and weathered teddy bear that was almost falling apart. I decided to speak out loud and asked that if a spirit of a small child was there to please come forward so I can greet them. I waited for several minutes, but everything was quiet. After exploring for about an hour, I thought it would be best for me to call it a night and begin to make my way back home to Vegas. Again, I spoke out loud, saying my goodbyes to any spirits that may be lingering around, and I asked that none of them follow me home like I normally do on all my other investigations. I promised to come back and visit him some other time, and that I had to leave. As I began to walk towards the old gates that led out to my truck, I noticed a very old plot that I hadn't seen before. The plot had a very old pair of boots on top of it and several closed beer cans that were very hard to read. I stopped to take a closer look, and as I reached out to grab one of the cans to see if I could read the label on it, I heard a loud child laughing directly behind me. The sound of the laughter startled me, and I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. I quickly turned around expecting to find somebody behind me, but there was nobody there. I shone my light around, still expecting to find somebody playing a trick on me, but I didn't see anyone. I dropped the beer can that I was holding and darted towards the cemetery gates in the direction of my truck. But something called my attention to look back to where the old plot was, and what I saw next will continue to haunt me for the rest of my life. Standing in the place where the boots were was a very large male-like figure that stood about 6 foot tall. I couldn't make his facial expression, but for some reason it seemed to be very angry that I was standing there, or that I was standing on his grave. My entire body froze, and I felt a cold rush run through my entire body that I could not shake off. For some reason, I could not bring myself to shine the flashlight in its direction. I stared at it for what seemed to be 2 or 3 minutes, but I'm pretty sure it would have been only 1 or 2 seconds. Once I seemed to realize what was going on, what happened next was the strangest part of this whole thing. I cannot explain how it happened, but I know it happened in the blink of an eye. I literally saw the figure go right back into the ground in the exact same place where it was standing, right next to the boots. Once I came to, I immediately jumped back into my truck and got the hell out of there as quickly as I possibly could. That stretch of road that once seemed nice and quiet to me seemed twice as long and the scariest road I have ever driven on. I was about half a mile out to the nearest gas station where I planned to stop, but through the peripheral vision and in the backseat of my truck, I noticed what looked like a human head sitting there. I did not want to turn around and look in my back seat in fear that I might see the ghost that I had just seen at the cemetery sitting in the back of my truck. And at that point, I honestly didn't care if I had picked up a real human hitchhiker or if somebody had snuck into the backseat of my truck. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. When I finally reached the gas station, I got out of my truck and made an inspection of the back seat. But as you may have already guessed it, there was absolutely nobody there. I walked into the convenience store and bought a couple of waters and an energy drink. I remember the clerk giving me a strange look and asked me if I was alright, and I honestly do not remember if I replied back or not. Ever since this experience happened to me, I've been back to the cemetery multiple times. There have been many witnesses that have heard me ask the spirit to tell me the nickname that I had given him while using the ghost box. And every single time I ask it, the answer is always the same. The children are still being reported by various drivers who go out to visit the semi-abandoned town of Goodsprings, Nevada. The guard who was killed is still haunting the cabin he died in, and you have all seen how haunted the Tommyknocker mine is. I will leave a link in the description to a few of the videos that are related to this story, including the one where we go back and ask the ghost to give us his name, and where you can clearly see my friend Katie get attacked by an unseen force. If you decide to go check out the cemetery, please remember to always be respectful of the area. People still live there. And ask the ghost if he will give you the nickname I gave him, but just keep an eye out, or else Boots may end up following you home too. Thank you all for listening to my story, and let me know in the comments if you would like to hear more of my personal experiences. Remember to hit that subscribe button and hit the notifications bell so you don't miss any of my future videos. Thanks for listening. Please remember to share with your friends. That's all for now. And always remember, stay strange.